I would like to present Marilyn Newton.
Well, they said that I should probably say something about myself before I start showing this. So, I started my journalism career at the age of 12 with the Carson City Appeal. And I worked there for 6 years and then went to go to school in Reno and ended up with a job at the Gazette Journal, and I've been there 44 and a half years. I might make it a career. Anyway, it said that I'm going to show graveyard photos, which I could do. I could show graveyard and news photos. So whatever you guys want, I'll do. You want graveyards?
Yes.
Okay, we'll show graveyards. So anyway, as we go along, if you have questions, I'm going to be sitting back there because I got to push the button. But if you have questions, please just yell them out to me and I'll answer them as I can, okay? And of course, any questions afterwards too. Okay? Here we go. If I can get it to work right. And I am going to sit down, so I won't be in everybody's way. Give me a second here. Thank you. That is it. No, I'm sorry about the music. This one is Carson City. It's the Chinese graveyard. And I was called and told that they dug a trench and they discovered the bodies. Now everybody basically knew the graveyard was there, but they never did anything about it. And this guy bought the place and decided he's going to build a building there. So when he dug the trench, he ran into this, and of course it stopped the project, but only for one day. And the museum had only one day to retrieve as many of the bodies as they could.
Is that on route?
Yeah, it's on route. It's right across the street from the cemetery, from the actual Lone Mountain Cemetery. And the interesting thing is, but he couldn't build anything underneath the ground. They made him keep everything above ground. And then the building sat vacant for years, so I think there's a little karma going on. This one is right out here, Empire.
Where's Empire?
New Empire. Just east. Oh, I'm sorry, east of Carson City. I'm sorry, east of Carson. And it's funny, I live near there. I walked by there many times, but I'd never gone in the graveyard until I did my book. It's just another view of it. This is one of two graveyards at the prison, and I got special permission to go on and photograph, and a lot of these people were executed, and some did die in prison, but most of them were executed. This is Fallon. Fallon has 4 or 5 different graveyards. But these were all military graves, and I love the clouds and the feel for it. And that's actually Highway 50 in the back down there. I have to look. This is the Allen Road Cemetery. This is that whole thing herself. You can see one little tombstone in the bottom. And this is out by Fallon. And I had to get, again, a lot of these are on private property, so I had to get special permission to go on. So I tell everybody, if you want to go look at them, fine, but if you want to get close, you really need to get the owner's permission. This is Stillwater, again at Fallon. This is on the Indian Reservation. I love this graveyard.
What vintage is that?
What vintage?
Yeah. Oh,
Well, they're still burying people there, but most of those right there were late 1800s, early 1900s.
Are they all Indian?
Yes, this is, well, I'm not saying that a few whites that were married to Indians aren't buried there, but basically this is an Indian cemetery. This is east of Fallon. This one's a very interesting story. A highway worker back in the 40s came into Fallon and said he found 2 skeletons on the playa east of Fallon, and that he reburied them there. And to this day, nobody knows if anybody is really buried there. Well, there's a lot of things. He said he found the skeletons of 2 girls. But first of all, a quarter of a mile away, you get off the playa, because the playa always floods, so why bury them on the playa? Why would the original people bury them on the playa? Then it came to be that it was the LeBeau children. Now, there was a LeBeau family, and they stayed at Middlegate, which is east of Fallon. And they apparently contracted some kind of disease, and he was trying to get them to a doctor, according to legend. And one by one they died, and when they all died, all of a sudden now there's 3 girls, by the way. When they died, he buried them there. But the thing is, Fallon wasn't even in existence at the time. If he was going to take him to a doctor, he would have gone to Austin. That was the nearest, doctor would be in Austin, not the way he was going. So like I said, nobody really knows, and they just leave it as a monument to the settlers. But now there's a 4th native. Now there's a boy, too. So, we don't know. It makes a fascinating story. Anyway, I shot this at sunset. I went out there special to shoot it.
What's that long thing?
That's just a pole, and if you look on it, you can't really see too much. It's a very much tattered American flag. This is down at Good Springs by Las Vegas. Neat place. It was Good Springs was a lead mining town, and it was in operation in the early 1900s. And it's hotter than you know what. Oh yeah, I love this one. Now I don't know who's getting. I was afraid to open the box.
The post office really delivers.
This is an Alamo, which is north of Las Vegas. And there's actually two graveyards that have mailboxes. That one and one, and I think it's in the show in Preston, which is up by you. So I saw that and I went, all right.
That's gorgeous.
This is I don't know if I can go back. Well, I'll tell you about the other one. It was a mound, and that was an Indian burial mound, and it's right on Main Street in Las Vegas.
Oh, really?
Okay, yeah, it's on Main Street. It's in very, but they wouldn't let me go in and get close-ups, of the graves. This is Mesquite. These are all sort of in order by county. So this is all Clark County. Mesquite, of course, is out by Las Vegas. Well, this is another interesting story. This is Queo, or Queo, however you want to pronounce it. It's Queho. And Queo was an Indian renegade. And he grew up by Las Vegas in the El Dorado, Nelson area, which is between there and, where Harry Reid grew up.
Searchlight.
That's one, Searchlight. Anyway, he had a half-brother named Devote, and he too was an Indian renegade, and he was really raising havoc. So the white men told the Indians that it was up to them to bring Devote in. And what they did was they sent Queo out to get him, and Queo came back with his hands to show that he'd taken care of him. But anyway, as a result, Queo became a renegade and was terrorizing a lot of people. And he was last seen in Las Vegas in the early 1900s. And about I'm going to have it wrong, in the 30s, early 30s, some mountaineers, whatever you want to call them, were out hiking the caves out by Hoover Dam, and they found a mummified body. Well, they were able to prove by some of the items he had with him that it was Quio. So anyway, they took his body, and for a long time, nobody would claim it. They wouldn't. People were claiming it. They wouldn't pay to get it back. So he was on display in the courthouse in Las Vegas. And then the Elks Club ended up with it. Yeah, the Elks Club. And they used to every year, Vegas had this Eldorado Days, sort of like our Nevada Days, the Eldorado Days in June. So they would prop Quio up in the seat of a Cadillac and take him down in the parade. Did that for years. Well, finally, and I can't remember his name offhand, but somebody from the district attorney's office was just incensed and finally was able to obtain Quio's remains. And they took him out and they buried him, and the handprints in the foreground are from the Paiute Indians, and it's told his spirit in place so it won't wander anymore. Is that in focus? Okay. This is at the Valley of Fire, and it's right along the road. You can see it from the road. And it was he was a teamster, and he was out there and he got run over by his own wagon. How, nobody knows. But anyway, he was found and then buried right there on the spot. But I love the colors. Glenbrook. Glenbrook actually has the only graveyard, at least in Nevada, around Lake Tahoe. I'm not saying there might not be some on the California side, but this is the only Nevada graveyard in Nevada. And I don't know much about the owl, but I sure do like it. Ah, yes. And thanks to Bob Ellison. I put this in my show, and it's right down here in the little cemetery down here. Garden Cemetery?
Yes.
Yeah, Garden Cemetery. And I looked at that and I went, okay, born March 1833, murdered between 9 and 14 of December 1900. When I went and did the book, I couldn't find anything on this. I searched everywhere I could in my limited time. But Bob Ellison found it for me, and he was murdered. He was found in his cabin, burned, and so they figure he died somewhere in those 2 days. And at first they didn't even find him because there wasn't very much left except a few bones. So anyway, they decided, discovered who it was, and I'm going to get partly a lot of this wrong about. But anyway, they decided this one Indian did it, and they arrested him. The whole bit, tried him, and he was acquitted. Now, this is back in the 1900s when Indians weren't acquitted of anything. But he was acquitted, and thank you, Bob, for getting that for me. Oh, yeah, this is way out in the Rubies, and it's just a lone grave, and I really don't know much about the chap, but it's by the Ruby Marshes. It doesn't look like it from this photo, but it was. Carlin, I love this one because the cross is pounded down into the ground. Beautiful little grave. This is Clover Valley. Clover Valley has 2 graveyards. Well, actually, I think there might be one more. Somebody told me I missed one. But I shot this just to show the mountains in the background. I better slow down a little bit or we're going to be done real, but then I can show you this.
Where's Clover Valley?
Clover Valley's on the other side of the Ruby Mountains. They'd be on the east side of the Ruby Mountains is Clover Valley. And there's a number of little mining camps and towns over there. Elko. Elko's got some great graveyards. Okay, I'll tell you the story now because I'm not sure if I've got any more Elko ones in here. Elko, the county graveyard in Elko, is the resting place of the only woman legally hanged in Nevada. Her name is Elizabeth Potts, and she and her husband were both hanged together. They killed a boarder that was staying with him in Carlin. The murders actually happened in Carlin. Anyway, apparently Josiah went around and clubbed the guy through a window. And right after the murder, they left. They went to Montana. So this other couple came in and got the place. And the guy was a minor, and of course the woman was just a housewife. Well, she kept hearing screaming from the basement. Terrified she wouldn't go down there, but she also didn't want to say anything to her husband. So she put up with it for a while, and then finally admitted she couldn't stand it. So he took a pole, and he went down in the basement, and what he found was feral cats. And those were the ones that were screeching, was these feral cats. But while he was down there, he noticed some disturbed earth, so he poked. And of course, if you watch Forensic Files, he found a body. And they determined it was the border. So anyway, they went to Montana and they arrested the Potts, brought him back. And they were tried and convicted and sentenced to hang. They spent more than a year in the Elko jail before this occurrence. And Josiah withdrew into himself, and he would play solitaire and other games, but he was pretty much just by himself. She, on the other hand, had ordered a shroud to be buried in, to be hung in and buried in. And it was white linen. And she tried it on every day. She tried this shroud on. Anyway, comes the day for the hanging, and the hangman mixed up the ropes. I don't know if people know, but they hang you by your weight, so it'll be the most effective way. Well, he was a slight chap, and she was rather large. So they mixed up the rope. So he strangled to death, and she almost lost her head. Anyway, they buried him in Popper's Field, and then back in the 1940s or thereabouts, they were moving Popper's Field, so they dug him up, and according to legend, they opened up her casket, and she was perfectly preserved, as was the rose that was on her chest. Anyways, they're buried up there, and it's in an unmarked grave, but I know where it is. This is Midas, which is some 50 miles from Winnemucca on a dirt road. But I did this one like this just because I just thought it was a beautiful little graveyard out amongst the sagebrush like that.
Who takes care of that?
The people in Midas.
It's really
They
great.
bring this out. This is Montello.
What is it?
Montello, which is out by Elko.
Never heard of this.
And these are, now back in 1918, I knew it was one of those, there was a real bad flu epidemic and people were dying like crazy. Well, they were coming through Nevada on the train, these troops bound for World War I, and they reached Montello, where 10 of them died. And so they buried them in the graveyard, and nobody knows who they are. Nobody knows who they are. Tuscarora, out by Elko again. Some of the wrought iron and stuff is neat, but I love the wooden crosses. I just love it. This is one of my favorite photographs in the book. This is at Star Valley, and that's exactly the way I found it. I did not add flowers or the boot or anything. That's the way it was when I found it.
Is that growing out of the boots?
No, it just, some
It
of
looks
it's,
like
they're plastic
cactus.
flowers.
Yeah.
They're plastic and just put there.
Oh, are they?
The interesting thing about this graveyard is, like I said, I used this one, but I do have photos on other shows. It is the only churchyard graveyard in Nevada. Now you got to realize that for the most part, people would find ore or whatever, and somebody would die, and they'd bury him, and they'd usually bury him up on a hill, away from the ore deposits, naturally, and also because of floods and such, bury him up on a hill. Well, if a town grew, it grew more up around the mining deposits, and then if they ever got a church, seldom, but once in a while they did, the church was in town, so that's why Nevada doesn't really have any churchyard graveyards. Anyway, Star Valley's up by Elko.
Is that the only grave in that yard?
No, there's a whole bunch of them. I just did this one because I love the boot.
Do they keep records of who's buried in these?
In some cases they do, but the problem is a lot of times the records have burned. You know, so a lot of times it's really, really difficult to find out who's buried where. Like, I don't know who's buried here. I have no
Do
idea.
you suppose his relatives are still there and they?
There might be. I just don't know who this person is. Wells. And it still looked like that when I was there for the earthquake. So I don't think it hurt the graveyard. I shot this at dusk. Oops. Go ahead. This is Columbus, which is on 95 on the way to Vegas. If you drive down there, you'll see a thing that says Columbus, ghost town, and this is the graveyard at Columbus. And I have no idea if it keeps it, I'm sorry?
Are there any names on any of these?
No, there were no names on any of those. And I never did find anybody, but I'm sure, somebody's taking care of it, so somebody might know some names. Oh yeah, this is another one of those stories. You notice there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, actually 6 names, little crosses, and there's 3 in the back and 2 and then 1. Don't remember this guy's name, but there's a name on the tombstone in the foreground. They were either, this is at Fish Lake Valley, Dyer, and it was either there or at Silver Peak. There was a poker game. The guy with the tombstone was winning. So he was headed home for Fish Lake Valley with the other guys in hot pursuit. And there was a gun battle. And when the gun battle was over, they were all dead or dying. And they were buried here in the Fish Lake Cemetery. But nobody knows why they built the fences around it. But there's no way in or out. I had to stand on my car to get this far. But it's great. It's great.
The stone is a fence, wasn't a building.
No, it was a fence. They actually built the fence out of slate. Yeah. This is Goldfield. Goldfield has very few graves that are with names. Most of them are the white crosses like this. And in the background, the reason why it's so dark is such a storm was brewing. Now, Goldfield has a really interesting story too, and I don't have a picture of it here because they put a new tombstone on it. But anyway, there was this family. He was a miner, and they were living in Goldfield, and he went to a different mining camp, and the family was going to follow shortly. Well, the little girl, I think she was 7, got very ill and died. And of course, the mother had no money for anything. So she convinced this guy, this other gentleman, to take the baby and bury it in the graveyard. But not to be outdone. She didn't want to leave the grave unmarked. On the way back, they were building a big school, and they were building it with granite blocks. She appropriated the granite block, and she spent all night with a hammer and chisel carving the name Joy into the stone, and then either the same gentleman or another one took it back and placed it on the grave. And since then, I think it's the road workers have since redone the monument for it, but it still says just Joy. This is Lida. Lida has 2 cemeteries. They've got a private cemetery, and they have a military graveyard out there too. There's a lot of military down there because of the Indians and such. The cemeteries date from the 1800s, 1870s, 1880s. Oh, and I can't remember his name. This is a 5-year-old boy, and he was buried along the road that actually goes to California. This is down near, outside of Goldfield, when you're starting to go.
Palmetto.
Palmetto, that's the one. Thank you, it's Palmetto. And actually what most people, there's another grave that I found out there too, well, 2 graves. But I use this one because it's a little 5-year-old boy that died. But at one time, there was a city that actually was along this road. Of course, it was dirt then, but it extended, they said, for almost a mile. But there's absolutely nothing left there now.
Who takes care of that one, though? That looks like it's in good shape.
I think there's some people in Goldfield that seem to take care of a lot of them, because there's another woman that's buried out there, and then this one grave with this man that's just there. And this one hurts. This is Eureka. And I love it with just all the tombstones laying down and such. Well, a group of youngsters went in and cleaned up the graveyard. And I mean, they cleaned it up. None of this is there anymore. By the way, it's now a felony to remove, damage, destroy anything in any graveyard or grave site in Nevada, all because of my book. I had friends that did that. This is another one at, I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus Jewish, 5 graveyards closed and then a Jewish one. I went in to talk to the museum there, and I said, so tell me about the graveyard behind the graveyard. And they said, what are you talking about? I said, there's a grave up there. It's outside the graveyard. And they didn't have any idea what I'm talking about, but somebody's taking care of this grave, but it's not. And when they're not in a graveyard, it's usually a gunslinger or a lady of the evening. Okay, this one is down by Biawau. These are the pioneers. It was an Indian massacre. Gravelly Ford. I remember that. Gravelly Ford. And this party was massacred by Indians, and they buried him right there. This is on private property at the Horseshoe Ranch, so you have to get permission to go, because you got to go drive about 2 miles to get down to this place. And this one hurt. This one was really, really too bad. The tombstones that you see there are all that's left of Mineral Hill. It burned 2 weeks before I got there. Oh, so that one hurt. You can still see some of the burned fences and such, but all the headboards and everything are gone. On the other hand, this is Palisade, not that far from Mineral Hill. And the graveyard survived, but the town didn't. What was left of the town, most of it burned during the brush fires. This was about 98 or 99 when we had all those big fires out there. I shot this one because I loved the headboard in relationship to the... Yeah. This is up at Indian McDermott. And it's really funny. I was out doing another story with a reporter, so I talked to the Indians. We're out there doing with the Indians, and so I asked if I could go photograph the graveyard, and they gave me permission. So we're down there, and I've got my reporter with me, and he's just got to put up with me while I'm doing this, you know. Anyway, I suddenly told him, I says, I want you to turn around. I don't want you to say anything, do anything. I want you to start walking very quickly back to the car. And so he did, and I did, and I says, now run. And he did, and I did, and I hit the button, and let's jump in, we got in, and here's these 2 big pit bulls coming out. Now, one more thing, working on this book was very interesting. I fell into 2 graves, found 2 skeletons, and got 2 flat tires. One flat tire was very interesting. I don't think I've got a picture of the grave, so I'll tell you real quick. I'm up at this, at Heiko, which has 3 graveyards, by the way. And this one is up on a ranch property. So I was up there for about an hour, hour and a half. So I stopped down just to tell them who I was, what I was doing. And I had to drive up a switchback. So I knocked on the door, and this, bulky 17-year-old, how they are. So I told them, and I left. So I backed down and drove down to the bottom of the switchback and had a flat tire. I'm going, now how in the heck did this happen? So I got my lug wrench out and such, only nothing's working. I cannot budge those lug nuts. So I went back up and got the kid, and he's trying. And I'm bemoaning the fact that I've got this flat tire. I don't know how it happened. real matter-of-factly like teenagers. Well, he says, dog bit it. And he's pointing this scruffy little thing that's no bigger than this. That must have fangs that big. And I says, dog bit it? And he says, yeah, he's already got a car and a truck. And I said, good night, he's that Jeep next to it. Anyway, he couldn't get it off. His brother comes home. The two of them couldn't get it off. Finally, and they used the compressor with a lug wrench. They wouldn't come off. So anyway, finally their parents came home, and between the father and the two boys, they got it off. And the father offered to buy me a new tire, and I said, not on your life. This one's for them. But the next day I was back. I had to drive all the way back to Ely with no spare tire, and then all the way back to Reno with no spare tire. But I stopped in Austin, and I called my mechanic and told him what happened and gave him the size and stuff. And I said, I need it because I'm going to Carson to prison to shoot those graveyards. So anyway, I drove back, and I get there, and there's this little knot of people, and I says, who are these people? Oh, they want to see the tire that was bitten by the dog. Me alone.
It's a real junkyard dog.
Yeah. This one, this is Paradise. Paradise has a beautiful, beautiful little graveyard. But I love the flowers, so I use this one. They've even got trees growing around some tombstones. Another story. This is Shoshone Mike. Now, does anybody know about Shoshone Mike?
No.
This is the last Indian massacre in the United States. Now, depending on who you want to believe, it was all the last massacre of whites by Indians, Shoshone Mike, but we definitely know it was the last massacre of Indians by whites. And what happened was, he was camped with his band in Little High Rock Canyon, and there were some sheep herders that were murdered. And it looked like the Indians had done it. And Shoshone Mike and his band were meandering across. This is in February, by the way, so it's not really good weather. But they're in their, on their way over to Oahu. Meanwhile, the whites form a posse and go out after them. And they finally find him here. This is over by Winnemucca. So anyway, a battle ensued. And when it was done, Shoshone Mike and most of his band were dead. Living were a couple of children and an older girl. And that was about it. It's interesting, they found a rifle on Shoshone Mike. It didn't match any of the bullets taken from the bodies of the white men. What appears happened is that some of the Miller Lux, who was a big ranching outfit, cowboys, were rustling sheep, cows, whatever, and the sheepers caught them and were probably killed, and they made it look like the Indians did it. Anyway, Mary Jo, this one little Indian girl, Mary Jo, they named Mary Jo Estep. And she lived to be, I don't know, about 79 or whatever. She was adopted out and lived, I think, in Idaho. But anyway, she still ended up dying by white men. You know, they gave her the wrong medicine in the hospital and she died. This is Winnemucca. Winnemucca's got a couple of graves. They actually moved one of their graveyards, almost all of one of their graveyards, when they built 95, US 95. This is just military graves. This is the photo that started the book. This is Tonopah, and this is where the dead from the Belmont mine fire, Nevada's worst mining disaster, this is where they were buried. And I had a friend, as I pulled up, he says, grab your camera, you've got to see this, and this is what I saw. And then the next day I went out to Belmont, because I'd never been to Belmont. And as I'm pulling up, here's the sign that says cemetery. Now, I did not turn down that road, but my car did. So anyway, I'm wandering around going, you know, geez, this might make an interesting book. So anyway, this is what started it. This is also Tonopah. Tonopah has 5 or 6 graveyards. This is the Catholic section. This is out at Argenta, which is on I-80 between Battle Mountain and Elko. And all it says is Baby Mitchell, and it's either 1918 or 1913. You can't really read the letter. But I checked with the powers that be in Lander County and also, Elko County, and nobody can find out anything about this baby. But the cross is only a short distance from where a Donner Party marker is. But as far as we know, it didn't come from any of the wagon trains, so nobody knows. Well, of course, it's 1918 anyway, so. This is Battle Mountain. They numbered all there, so you can check. Now these, you can go and check to see who's buried there. Oh, I love this graveyard. This is Kingston, which is south of Boston. And they use, headboards, head frames, and sometimes the whole bed to mark the graves. So that was fun. Bullionville, which is over by Panaca and that area of Clark County. I love clouds, so I play with clouds. This is the only grave up there that I saw. Caliente. Caliente's got some pretty little graveyards, but I like this one with the horses. Delmar. They told me when I was going to Delmar, they said even if you see a cloud in the sky, you don't go to Delmar. Because if you do, you may be there for a few days. Because of flash flood. So the first time over, I couldn't get there because there was clouds in the sky and it was threatening rain. So I had to drive all the way back across the state to go to Delmar. So anyway, I'm driving up the road and it's getting pretty rough, so I put it in four-wheel drives and climb up over this big hill and drop down, and I look, and here's the remains of Delmar. And I'm going, there's no way in they could ever get a graveyard up here. So I nosed around a bit and stuff, drove back down the hill. It was at the very bottom of the hill. I'd passed it going up. That's why there's no maps. I figure if I had to search for them, you guys can too. This is Boot Hill. You never guess that, would you? This is a Pioche.
Do they really call it Boot Hill?
That they call it Boot Hill, and that's their Boot Hill. And Pioche has 4 cemeteries that I know of, but they've got some really bad people. Really nasty people. Buried here. One was a guy named Morgan Courtney, and he was not a nice person.
Where is Pio?
Pioche is down on 93, going toward Las Vegas. By the way, 93 is the best kept secret in Nevada. If you've never been down there, it's in the summertime, it's absolutely beautiful. You go out like to Ely and then down, it's incredible. This is Fort Churchill. Now, right, the Fort Churchill, of course, was a fort during the Pyramid Lake Indian Wars. And when the fort was abandoned, they moved all the graves and had a big ceremony set to move all the bodies to Carson City where they now lie. But then the guy that bought the property used the graveyard for his own family, so there are still graves there. This is Schurz, another Indian graveyard. I use this one just because I like the way it looked. But this is where Wovoka is buried. Now Wovoka is the ghost dance messiah. And he was a very interesting person. He was a con artist. Like he used to shoot at shirts and then show they had no holes in it, but that's because the wind was blowing, and stuff like that. But anyway, he's the one that started the ghost dance that actually led to the Battle of Wounded Knee. And he's buried there.
Are those mostly marked or unmarked?
Some of them are marked. Wovoka's is marked. You can find Wovoka's. This is Silver City. Now I've got other photos too, but Joe, what's his name? One of the guys that discovered silver is buried. Gross. Thank you. Brain's not working tonight. He hit himself in the foot with an axe. He got blood poisoning and died. So he's buried there. Interesting, his brother then left to go to California, and he ended up dying in the mountains in California. But they're the ones that discovered silver. This is Smith Valley. Pretty little graveyard. Ah, yes, this, okay. I'm up at, this is at Aurora, and Aurora's got 3 cemeteries. And I'm up there with a friend, and I'm out shooting and wandering around, and this guy shows up, wanting to find the grave of a gunslinger. Well, I didn't know anything about a gunslinger. So anyway, we're walking around and stuff, and he finally says, I gotta ask you. I said, yeah, and he says, why the gun? And of course, when I'm out there, I'm wearing a hog leg that comes halfway down my leg. And I looked at him and just said, real matter-of-factly, snakes. And of course, we're up in the mountains, and he's saying, what kind of snakes? And I said, 2-legged. He didn't bother me after that. But anyway, he left, and then I found the grave. This is the gunslinger. The gunslinger's name is William Carder, C-A-R-D-E-R. And this is when Aurora was part of Nevada and part of California. So they actually had elected officials for both. And he was a lawman in California, but when he was over here, for some reason, he was not a nice person. So he hired this guy to buy him some horses. The guy bought them and left him in the valley rather than bringing him all the way up into Aurora, left him in the valley to see what he wanted. Well, this really infuriated him. So the poor guy knew his number was up. You know, this guy, Carter was going to get him one way or the other. So one day Carter comes into town and he's in a vile mood. He's twisting people's noses and tweaking their ears. So the guy goes and gets a shotgun and secrets himself in the doorway next to his Carter's favorite bar. And he waits for Carter to come out, and he let him have it with both barrels and killed him. Anyway, if you can read it, it says, his wife put this up and says that he was assassinated. But he too is not buried inside the fence. That's 95 in the background, and that's just east of Hawthorne a few miles. At first I thought it was just one of those graveside, roadside markers, until I went and found out all the Chinese writing on it. I had a friend of mine that was in the Peace Corps in China at the time, so I sent him this picture, and it's all done in ancient script, but he had it translated, and basically what it says is this man is from Wupu province. This is, he lies here, but we don't know his name. That's basically what it says. Oh, this is another one of my favorite little graveyards. This one's at Mina. And every year, somebody goes out there and puts all those ribbons up there. Just makes it really pretty. Berlin. The state is really interesting. They don't like photographers going on state property and photographing anything, so I've had to fight tooth and nail sometimes. So they finally gave me permission to go up and shoot and not bother me. And the graveyard's outside the park limits. There's also up there, but over on this side, there's a lone grave, and it's an Indian woman that was quite elderly, and she was sort of befriended by the people of the town. But the Indians, sometimes when people got old, they would leave them to die, basically. That's just their culture. Only the white people kept feeding her, so she kept feeding her. This is Berlin. It's out by Gabbs. Go down Highway 50, past Fallon and stuff, and you go right. There's a road that says Gabbs. You go out that way, Berlin's. It's a neat ghost town. It's the most well-preserved ghost town in Nevada, being a state park. So it is neat to see.
And they don't like you taking photographs of the town?
Well, no, they don't like professional photographers. They want you to pay to be able to shoot photos. So I've
They
had
want you to
really
do
bad-
what?
Huh?
Pay?
Yeah, pay. They want you to pay money. to photograph.
Is it Indians or is it?
No, it's a state park.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's not fun.
Just tell them that you're a tourist.
Well, that's just it. If I show up, and I try to do things by the book. Shouldn't, but I do. This is Camp Rockefeller. It's down on the bombing range by Tonopah. And I had to get permission to do this one too, because of course it's being on the bombing range. So they took me up there to get the photos.
How do you know it's there?
Somebody told me.
Is that how you find out about most of these places?
Uh-huh. Mhm. There was actually a mining camp here, and this is the only grave, and her name was Josephine Tate. I know that much. And her family used to come and tend the grave for quite a while, but I don't know if there's nobody left or what, so nobody's really paying much attention to it. But the military was really good, and they let me stay on base and the whole bit for a night, so I mean, they were really good. Manhattan. And I don't need to say anything. It just says it all. I mean, what a great monument. I like to include this one because it shows you that you can screw up and it still works. That is because I'm having trouble with my lens was not operating quite the way it should have, and I got a flare from the setting sun, and that's exactly the way the picture looks. I didn't do anything. This is rhyolite, by the way. I was down in Nye County doing a story, and I got talking to this one rancher, and I was mentioning, asking if he knew of any graves around there. And he said, yeah, I've got 2 of them on my ranch. So he said, yeah, you can go shoot them. Gave me permission. So on the way back, I'm out shooting, and all of a sudden I realized I had a lot of company. They were sure nosy.
Oh, there you go.
This is the Black Rock Desert.
UFOs.
Now, we do not know if there's somebody really buried there, or if that's just his tombstone, but there is a tombstone. The guy was a Korean War veteran, and his tombstone, his, whatever you want to call it, was right there on the desert. I was out there for a balloon adventure. That's why the balloon's up there. This is a Chinese cemetery in Lovelock. I love the bottle. It's a beautiful one. The interesting thing about Chinese in Nevada is, or anywhere, if they died, what they always tried to do is bury them for a year, and then if possible, they would have the bones shipped home or come over and get them and take it back to China. That was very important to them, but a lot of times they couldn't do it. So there's a lot of Chinese graveyards in Nevada, including one in Reno.
Railroad workers.
Yeah, railroad workers. Oh, this one's neat. This is Susan Coon. This is the only marker on the Immigrant Trail. And there's only half of hers now. Susan Coon was 40 when she was coming across Nevada, and she was pregnant. And she had her baby, but she died in childbirth. This is out by west of Winnemucca. And she died in childbirth, and they buried her there, but they had a stonemason with them, and he stayed up all night carving the stone.
Mm-hmm.
Then, of course, somebody's had to take half of it. Unionville.
What is it?
Unionville, which is out before Winnemucca and after Lovelock. You have to turn off and go about 12 miles. There is a tombstone there that says, has this woman's name and says she was killed by Indians. But to show how good it works, in Wadsworth, there's an Indian cemetery and there's a gravestone that says killed by white man's liquor. That's their play. Virginia City. This shows probably 1, 2, 3, 4. I can count about 5 or 6 of the 25 graveyards there are up there. There's only 11 known now, but there are 25. But I've never figured out if the 25 includes the Old Catholic or the Pioneer and the Chinese graves. I'm not sure, but anyway, this is Silver Terrace Cemetery. It's in Virginia City.
How do you go about researching a grave site?
I didn't really try to do grave sites that much, but I'm working on volume 2, which is going to be grave sites. Elko's given me a 2-page list, so now I got to go and spend some time.
How do you go about researching the grave?
The grave?
Like a tombstone?
Mostly people just tell me, and then I try to, if I can, I just search newspapers and stuff to see what I can find out. This is Virginia City again. Gerlach. How are we doing on time? Oops, quickly, yes, Gerlach. How many people have been to Gerlach? Not too many, okay. Well, if you go to Gerlach and you go through the town, the road splits. Where the road splits is the graveyard. The Hillside Cemetery in Reno. Interesting thing, this guy bought this cemetery, and what he wanted to do was remove all the bodies and put them into a mass grave over my dead body. But anyway, he wanted to do that, and then he found out something really interesting. The only thing he owned was the walkways.
Was the what?
All the graves were deeded to the families. So all he owned was the walkways in between.
Are all these grounds and all these cemeteries protected by something? I mean, so that you can't go in there and build on top of them and stuff?
There is now, like I said, because of my book, they passed a law where it's a felony to remove, damage, or destroy.
So it's all protected everywhere?
Mhm.
So even if you owned the grave sites themselves, you couldn't do anything?
Not now.
Okay, good.
This is our Civil War cemetery in Reno. And I purposely shot it in the snow because I wanted to white against white. For the most part, I'm a fair weather shooter. I don't like snow. But for this one, I did. Oh, this is an interesting, Jeremiah Rogers. He died in 1844. This is just south of Reno in the Steamboat area. And he got some kind of an ailment and died, and they waited the next day and then buried him. And his family continued on to Placerville, but family members came back, and little by little they built they hired people to build the fence and such. And
Is that still there?
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah, it's still there. In fact, now around it is a bunch of pet graves. So they actually made it a pet cemetery around here. But anyway, the wife never did return, but the family did.
Family came back.
Yeah. This was one of those accidents. This is the cover. This is Washoe City, between Reno and Carson. I've driven by that place for 50 years, never stopped. So one day I'm heading down to the legislature, got a few minutes, so I stopped. Got out and was just looking around, and I noticed there's some buildings which were not helping my photos any, so I just hunkered down, and I looked up, rainbow. So I waited 50 years to get that picture.
I just thought that was a camera malfunction.
Yeah, I wish, I'm not. I can't remember the name, but I actually met the daughter of the man that made this tombstone for Black Horse Miner. This is in the area by Ely, and it was known as Black Horse. And the reason is this guy was a raging storm. He sought cover underneath an outcrop of rocks while the storm was passing, looked up and discovered ore. So they named the whole mining district Black Horse. Also in White Pine County, this is up by Church Creek. This is Egan. Egan this is a military cemetery. These are all cavalry. They had a number, what with the Pony Express and everything, they had a number of major incidents up there. Yeah, this is Preston. This is over by Ely. This is the other mailbox. But it didn't have its flag up. Not half as much fun as the first one. Oh, this is Shelbourne, again on private property. And I'm trying to remember the whole story, but there was a bunch of people killed, not a bunch, several people killed. And they tracked the guys down and brought them back to where they killed them, hanged them, and buried them there. If you go up on the road to Mountain City from Elko, you can travel for almost 2 miles. And if you stop and walk, you'll find all these little markers. And some of them date back more than 60, 70 years. And these are all pets. This is a pet cemetery. I had to sort of round it out with something, so T28s are good, This is at El Dorado, down at El Dorado, which is, like I said, between Searchlight and Las Vegas. And I'm driving down there because they've got some great graveyards down there. And I'm driving down and screech. So I like the plain graveyard. And that's it. Have you?
Well, anyways, I'm with Dan Howard, County Manager of Douglas County, and I'm a big fan of Dan. I'm going to say that right away. But I'm still getting people, when I say what a hero you are to me, who are mad about the redevelopment money.
Sure.
And that's, I guess I don't understand why you got the blame for that.
It was a proposal, working with the developers, working with that. You bring that forward. And I think the issue that ultimately the Board of County Commissioners approve it.
Right.
I think that the argument they'll get on that is, well, if the manager, if they never brought it forward, they wouldn't approve it.
Well, that's silly.
So I think the arguments there is, well, either, the information we presented, talk the board into it, or whatever.
You just take the board behind the back and say you're big, and you just
Sure.
you make them
That's
vote
okay.
your way.
Yeah, no, it did. But those types of issues, I mean, you're going to have those everywhere. And that issue, it's tough. I honestly believe it was the right decision that we need to do for the long-term health of the county.
Mm-hmm.
We met, we negotiated, we brought it forward. The board obviously agreed
Well, yeah,
that it was the right decision to move forward. They did not take that decision lightly. It was difficult for them. And again, now the issue is, now that that's done, let's make it successful.
Well, yeah.
And I think you can't keep debating over what if. And the other side of that is that it makes it sound like we spent a bunch of money day one, and we haven't spent a nickel of that money.
See, that's the thing that needs to get out there.
And we haven't spent it. And when we do spend it, it's going to be spent over, I think it's like close to 20 years.
Well, I keep
over
on
time.
hearing people talk about the conspiracy theory of the
Right.
and I don't understand it.
It just doesn't happen.
So I just think this is what we're doing now is simple education, because you're educating someone like me.
Sure, it's great for
and I
people to throw
appreciate
that
it.
out there, but if that's real, then step up to it. But that's not how we operate.
Well, it's just the way people think, because
Sure.
I filmed or taped, because people get technical when I say that.
Okay.
The airport authority meeting.
Or
Talk
the-
about nasty.
The AAC meeting here?
I think that's what it's called. Your airport authority?
Yeah, it's the Airport Advisory Committee.
Yeah, and essentially there's about our collective about 200 people that are really upset. And there's
Sure.
all these conspiracy things going on.
Sure.
And again, I'm confused because
You just
isn't there
don't-
power? I mean,
Yeah,
people
yeah, you
can't do
just-
something without
right.
a vote.
Yeah, well, getting those things approved and that process for it. So, there's a lot of administrative work that gets done that people would rather sometimes have that more at the political level. And there's always that balance. How much administrative, authority do you give, and how much administrative work versus policy and board votes? But at the same time, you try to make that dichotomy. So you have a, policy-driven elected office,
Mm-hmm.
setting policy, setting standards, and then the administrative side that goes implements all that.
Well, that's exactly
And
what I was
that's a
saying
lot of
earlier.
process.
Is
So
that,
you try to balance those off.
that the board was a little bit fragmented this year because of all the illnesses and the new people
Sure.
and things. And then I thought you were carrying the ball, but you can't control the votes or anything. You
No,
just,
ultimately, the board votes, they're conscious where they want to go. Now, we do have some control over some of the, as issues come to them, just in preparing them and getting them there, the information, all that type of stuff. That's a normal staff job to do that. And then they run with it from there.
Excellent.
So,
Well, I also have another silly question that came to trouble a little bit. You and Jerry seem to have a good rapport.
Jerry Evans, yeah, I do the other radio show with.
And I enjoy watching the show
Yeah,
because
Jerry's fun.
He slapped you around.
Sure. And then, he does that, and it's good. I mean, he asks honest questions. I
Yeah.
think he tries to ask questions that he thinks the public wants to hear.
Yeah.
We have a good relationship. So other people go like, what, do you like each other type.